am not a book content creator. I know, but I love to yap about books. I'm actually a small business owner, and if you peek at my other content, I really like to yap about wellness and habits, but that's not my entire personality. I really like to talk about things that I like to do as well, and that includes reading. So we're going to talk about all the things that I've read so far in 2025 as a newbie reader. What do I mean when I say I'm a newbie reader? Really what I mean is that I discovered my love for reading at almost 30 years old. The first time I picked up a book for fun was at the end of 2021. Prior to that, I really just read for work and for school. I think just the fact that I was being tested and graded on the material and remembering the material and how I articulated the material stressed me out. And so reading was associated with that versus reading for fun. Then from 2022 to 2024, I was struggling with chronic illness, and I needed something to help me escape the mental, for lack of a better term, turmoil that I was experiencing without continuing to rewatch my comfort shows. I needed less screen time in my life, just needing a little bit of an escape, a little bit of a distraction from time to time so that it wasn't constantly something that I was thinking about. If you want to hear more about my chronic illness journey and how I got into the field of wellness from that, let me know. I'd love to make a video to talk about that. But so along the way, I started to discover that if I wasn't being tested and graded on the material, and I actually got to choose what I wanted to read, I actually liked reading. Go figure. And another reason that I consider myself more of a newbie reader is because I'm still really learning what I like to read. You know, I think for me personally, there is a pretty good variety of things that I read, from young adult to fantasy to cozy to thriller to mythology and more literary things. And I don't really think I've nailed down what my favorite go-to things are. I think it also really widely depends on my mood. There are things that I love to read at certain times. I've read some romance and loved it, and there are times where I'm romance is giving me the ick. As I'm figuring out my taste in reading, what I really like, I wanted a place where I could start documenting just some of my thoughts. And also I'm starting a home library from literally zero. I think I have about 30 books right now, so it's just now started in the past couple of months that I'm actually developing a home library. I know I have a long way to go to get to 1,000, but we're not in a rush. I'm reading what I consider a normal pace for people to read. It's not my full-time job to read. It feels a little unrealistic when there's people reading 12 books a month consistently, and I'm reading 4 or 5. And I just wanted a place to be a little bit more realistic about it. All that to say, I did read a lot in January. So without further ado, let's talk about the books I've read so far in 2025, starting with January reads. I actually did read quite a bit in January. However, I'm also including audiobooks that I've read in the month of January. So that's gonna bump up my number a lot. Keep that in mind. This is not just physically reading, this is also audiobook. So first one on this list is Taming 7. This is number 5 in the Boys of Tommen series by Chloe Walsh. And I did read the first 4 in 2024. And I rated those 4s out of 5, all of them. So that's Binding 13, Keeping 13, Saving 6, and Redeeming 6. 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order. I rated all of those 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. I was really in an emo phase last year. So those hit because emotionally they were heavy and I was feeling really heavy. And so that felt comforting at that point in time. I don't know if I would rate those 4s out of 5 now. They were extremely long, and I even felt that way while I was reading it. Even though it hit for me, it was still really long. But I did enjoy them while I read them. I might read the next ones, but that's not high on my list. So anyway, I read Taming 7. This was really I started this back in 2024 and I wanted to finish it. And I think maybe I wasn't in that same emotionally heavy place at the end of 2024. Praise the Lord. So I don't think this one hit. I also really just did not enjoy the plot of this one. So I rated this a 2.5 out of 5. On Goodreads, I rated it a 2. But I would say it's probably 2.5. Because I think the extra half is because I've invested so much in this series already, and there are other characters in the book, in the world that I like and think are really great and well developed. But I did not enjoy the couple on this book. So Taming 7 is specifically about Claire and Gibbsy, who they are the couple that's in love with each other, but they're not actually together, and they're too scared to get into a relationship. And that doesn't hit for me. I also think some of the topics, there's probably some trigger warnings that need to be read for this, and I was not prepared for some of the topics that went into this. I also think the execution of it just wasn't great given those topics. I think if the execution was better, I probably would have enjoyed some of that hard, heavy stuff more. I think the hard, heavy stuff was done better in the first few than this one. And it just felt like if that's the characters, if that's Gibbsy's story, if that's Claire's story, it almost felt like a letdown. Given that there was like such a buildup about them in the first 4 books, I just felt let down by that. So I rated it a 2 out of 5 on Goodreads, but probably more like a 2.5. Moving on, I needed palette cleansers after that one for sure. So that moved me to, okay, I've never read Emily Henry and I hear so much about Emily Henry. Let's read a book by her. So I picked up Beach Read by Emily Henry and I finished this in a day and a half. This is a 5 out of 5. I see what the hype about Emily Henry is. She develops really incredible characters that feel adult, that like I'm 30 now. I feel like I could be reading this about one of my friends versus like, reading about 18-year-olds or young 20-year-olds, like early 20s. That's like a completely different life stage from late 20s, early 30s. And so I loved this book, ate it up, read it so fast. Gus and January were probably one of my favorite couples that I think I've ever read in a romance book. I think development of the characters, their backstories, their like very realistic engagement with each other. It does not read as like this corny romance to me, which I really enjoyed. I do love some corny romance sometimes, but I needed, after the previous book, I really wanted something that felt more realistic, and this was executed so well. So this is about January, who moves into her recently deceased father's house to finish a book for the summer, and her next door neighbor is her college nemesis, essentially. Their summer is they're both writing books, and to get out of their like writer's block, they're writing in each other's genre, and I just loved it. I ate that up. That was the best day and a half of probably January for me. Beach Read I could probably give 6 stars. Is 6 out of 5 stars even a thing I can do? Not on Goodreads, but in my head, in my heart, I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 5 because I enjoyed that so thoroughly. There is like a little bit of spice in there. If that's not something you're into, easy to skip. So I enjoyed Beach Read so much that I turned right around and said, let's read Happy Place. So book 3 for January is Happy Place by Emily Henry. And this was also a 5 out of 5 stars for me. Again, I'm a newbie reader, so like my 5s out of 5s may not be your 5s out of 5s, just I want to preface that, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. This gave me everything that I wanted. Again, very well-developed characters that felt realistic. I'm not going to say this is a 6 out of 5 compared to Beach Read because I didn't love the trope essentially that this one is about. So this one is about Harriet and Wynn, and they met in college. They were dating in college. They fell in love. They got engaged and they broke up, but their friend group doesn't know. So their really tight friend group doesn't know. And they go on this trip and they're pretending that they're still engaged, basically for the sake of not ruining the trip with their friend group. I didn't love that. I think what I desire to read about is friendships that can talk about anything, not friendships that feel like they can't. And I think that ended up being a lot of like the arc of the book was Harriet realizing that those are the types of friendships that she has, but she was not stepping into that. So I really personally actually related to Harriet in that. Actually, that arc was satisfying, but it wasn't my favorite trope. The pretend dating is not my favorite trope. The individual development of Harriet made this a 5 out of 5 for me. Hopefully that was making sense. All right, after that, I said, well, book talk hasn't failed me with Emily Henry, but I'm craving a little fantasy. So let me try Powerless. Overall rating is a 4 out of 5. I need to readjust. This is serious and my foot was falling asleep. I gave this a 4 out of 5 because I do think that I really enjoyed. It felt like something I hadn't read before. Again, I'm a newbie reader. I think there's some critique about this series being similar to a series from the 2000s, but I haven't read that series. So this essentially was a new plot for me. So I really enjoyed that. The book could have been 200 pages less, 1,000%. And actually, I'll talk about Powerful really quick because this is going to be the 1.5 in this series. A little novella, but was still 250 pages or something like that. Crazy. Girl, yeah. 252 for a novella. I'm sorry, that's a whole book. That should not be called a novella. That is a whole book. I think if we had put the plot line of Powerful into Powerless and made Powerless shorter, that would have been a 5 out of 5 read for me. But it wasn't that. Lauren Roberts, if you want to take notes from me, just, we can chat. I do really like the characters. I am a sucker for a love triangle, and this had that. This also was rated as perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas, and Throne of Glass is my favorite book series that I've ever read of all time. I'm confident saying that even as a newbie reader, that was my favorite series I've ever read, and probably will be. I love the premise of like the elites versus the ordinary. I loved Peyton and her just grit for survival. And it did have a little bit of like Hunger Games-esque game type dynamic to it, which I'm also a sucker for Hunger Games. That's probably the only book series I read in high school that was not for school. I loved it. So much so that I jumped right into book 2. So like I want to be clear, like just because I'm rating it a 4 out of 5 does not mean I did not. That is like a still high rating for me. I think it just didn't need to be as long as it was. Moving to book 2, that's Reckless in the Powerless trilogy. Also a 4 out of 5. Same kind of notes in the sense that it could have been 200 pages less. But I loved the dynamic of like Peyton and Kai fighting their attraction to each other. That was fun to read. That was entertaining to read. That kept me turning pages. There was like also a more than just like a 2 POV in this one, which, if I'm remembering that right, I think the first one, Powerless, only had 2 POVs, and now in this one we're getting more POVs, so that made it a little bit different. But I love that we like changed locations, and also there's this like really big conflict from the end of book 1 that's brought into book 2 between Peyton and Kai. The end of book 2 cliffhanger, like I will be reading the 3rd one when it comes out, and it comes out next month, I'm pretty sure. I'm hyped about it. Okay, going to book 1.5, which I previously mentioned, Powerful in the Powerless trilogy. It's based around Adina, Peyton's best friend, and her love interest. And I'm just like, okay, the fact that these are at the same timeline, I would have rathered have that in book 1 and less material. It would have been better. It would have been a 5-star read for me if those things were together. And I would have enjoyed Adina's story, I think, a lot more as well, because she's only kind of a background character in book 1, and then in this 1.5, she's using 252 pages to introduce us to more about Adina, and I would have just rather had a multi-POV in book 1 combining those plot lines. I don't know how else to say that because I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I rated that a 3 out of 5. Purely for the sake of it was too long and should have been in book 1. Again, I'm still going to read book 3 when it comes out, okay? Because I got to know what happens. While those were all the books that I read physically or on my Kindle, okay? Kindle and physical are in the same category for me. So I re-listened to Legend, Prodigy, Champion, and Rebel. It's a 4-part series. I read this at the end of 2023. And again, newbie reader, anything I read was like a 5-star. I've tamed down a little bit, okay? It like rocked my world that could even be, I could be that entwined in a book. So I rated those 5 stars back then. Re-listening to them, I was still very emotional listening to them. Legitimately cried on my walk multiple times while listening to it. So these are 4s out of 5 for me. Purely for the sake of I've read other things that get the 5-star spot. And so those kind of get bumped down a little, just a hair. I would say if I could rate, on Goodreads, if I could give 0.5s, I probably would do 4.5s for all of them. I lied. Not about all of them. Rebel would be like a 3.54, 3.75, somewhere in there. Because that really wasn't like, if you don't know anything about this series, it was originally a trilogy. And then the trilogy didn't really wrap up like some of these characters' plot lines, I think, when it was originally written. And so Rebel was written like way later, the 4th one, to kind of tie some more bows on like plot things that had happened. So I did appreciate that in the sense of like I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing how those things tied up, but it was not, the stakes were not as high for me as they were in the first 3 books. And so those would be higher rated for me. Anyway, did I re-listen to them and enjoy every second? Yes, I did. I still think that's a stellar series. Okay, so those are my January reads. That is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a total of 10 reads in January. Again, I re-listened to 4 books. So 4 If you're someone that only counts physical books, I read 6. We don't play that game here. Any type of reading is reading to me. Okay. Going to February. February, significantly less reading done. February flew by. I'm still confused how it's March. Kicked it off with, I actually think I started this book in January, and I'm still not done with it. So that'll tell you kind of how it's going. But I started reading this mythology retelling called Stone Blind, and it's about Perseus and Medusa. I will say, I do and am enjoying it, but am I done with it? No. It reads more like a classic in that sense. And it doesn't flow as easily for me as some other books and authors, and so it's just taking me a little bit to get through it. Have there been multiple times though where I've like gasped at what happens in this mythological retelling? Yes. When I can get into it, it is really good. So I still have like 10% of this book left because I've been reading other things alongside it. You know, I can't always get into it, but I have enjoyed that, and it's probably going to be better rated than some things that I've read for sure. Assistant to the Villain. This is a series. It is going to be a trilogy, but there's only 2 books out right now. 5 out of 5. Would give 7 out of 5. I have never laughed out loud so many times while reading a book, walking on an incline, sweating my booty off, and laughing out loud. When I say it's a kick your feet and giggle type of cozy fantasy, that is not me overhyping it. I literally was giggling in bed reading this, giggling on the treadmill, like everything. So good, in fact, I went to a book exchange in February and I gave my copy away because I was like, I can't give anybody a better book than this right now. Like, that is how much I loved it. Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mirror. I freaking love this book. This is about a girl named Evie Sage, and she applies for a job to work for the villain as the assistant to the villain. And like, his name is the villain of Renadon. Okay? He has his mission as the villain to take down the king of Renadon. And she's becoming his assistant while not really telling anybody that that's who she works for because it's confidential. His like plans are being foiled. His evil plans are being foiled. And so her job is to like pretend that she is like this good citizen of Renadon, but also is assisting the villain to like not have his plans foiled. So basically to like let evil in Renadon pursue. Okay. Her character is so good. Like chef's kiss, so funny. Her sense of humor is witty and quick and funny. And then also I like that this type of fantasy in this world of Renadon is not like, it's not like fantasy I've read other places. There's a lot of like magical creatures and there are powers, but it's not fairy people. And I'm not hating on that type of fantasy. I just think there's a lot of that type of fantasy. Anyway, 7 out of 5 would rate it. Okay. The fact that this only has 3.93 on Goodreads, I'm like, did we even read the same book? That's all you gave it? Immediately picked up Apprentice to the Villain, which is book number 2, because I had to know what happens. And 7 out of 5. Still funny, still love the characters. We get to know more about them, and it's like getting more emotionally invested in the villain and Evie's working and personal relationship. That's all I'm going to say, because I'm not trying to spoil anything. Like, I love this sentence on the book description. Still, the business of being bad is demanding. The forces of good are annoyingly persistent, and said forbidding boss is somewhat out of evil office. It is so creative and so well done, and things that I like never would have predicted. I just loved this series. Like, I cannot wait. The next book doesn't come out until like August, and I will be rereading both of these books before it comes out. It was so good. This is my top series right here that I've read so far in 2025. Like, this is the standard that the other series I read this year have to meet. It's a high standard. So next is All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker, and this was like a really popular book that came out in 2024. It has a Read with Jenna sticker. I don't even know who Jenna is, I'm gonna be honest. I'm pretty sure that's a famous person, but 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. I really liked the premise of this story, but it is marketed as a thriller, and it is not written like a thriller. It is written like a deep character study of the most unlikable male main character. And that's really all I can say without spoiling it. There's some reviews on Goodreads that I read prior to that I 100% agree with, that there's a lot happening in the beginning, and then there's a really long stretch in the middle where it feels like there's stuff happening, but it's kind of repetitive. And then the whole book wraps up in the last like 30 pages. This is a 600-page book. Like, it could have been way shorter, way more impactful, and also I just wish the male main character did some things differently. And it just wasn't really satisfying at the end. It was wrapped up so quickly. However, some saving graces. This was my first book by Chris Whitaker. His writing is really well done. I actually really enjoyed his style of writing. It took me a second to get used to it, and I actually did like a tandem listen while I read with this book to kind of help me get used to it, because it is different than like what I was reading previously with, like, you know, Assistant to the Villain and more mythology. I wouldn't say it reads like a classic, but it also doesn't really read like a modern book. And it was set in like the 70s time frame. But yeah, Patch is not my favorite male character I've ever read. He was an idiot, but I would read more of Chris Whitaker. But I don't think that book lived up to the hype that I think it's gotten. Also, there's some trigger warnings on that. There are a lot of heavy topics in there, but that was executed well compared to like thinking about some similar topics were done in Taming 7, not executed well, kind of left me feeling down. I didn't leave this book emotionally distraught about the heavy topics. So those are the books I read in January and February of 2025. Let's talk about what I'm reading in March. I'm gonna finish Stone Blind. That needs to be finished as soon as possible. I did not do a good job in February reading or keeping my Goodreads or Fable updated. I started Fable. If you have Fable and Goodreads, can you put in the comments like which one you like better? Because I don't think I have the stamina to keep up with both. Again, this is not my full-time job, right? Like, so I'm feeling stressed by having like multiple things, and I've used Goodreads the most, but I think I like Fable better. I think it's just aesthetically better, and I can add 0.5s and things. Anyway, let me know if you like Fable or Goodreads better, because I think I need to just prioritize one. I need to consolidate how many things I'm updating, you know? So Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I started reading this because I went to dinner with my friends, and it was already on my TBR. Let me be clear. Already on my TBR by Chris and Mads. There were multiple people at this table saying it was like one of the best book series they've ever read, and that the books only get better as you go through. So like book 1 is great, but then it also gets so much better as you go through. So the hype was hyped at dinner. And so I was like, I have to rearrange my TBR to read this next, because I already have the copy of Red Rising. I might as well read this next. I am 2 chapters in, and I'm not seeing it. So we need to come back to March, the March recap, and see where we've gotten, because I want to give it its full proper chance. I'm just going to read. Darrow is a Red, a member of the lowest caste in the color-coded society of the future. Like his fellow Reds, he works all day believing that he and his people are making the surface of Mars livable for future generations. So we're already on Mars, okay? We're not even on Earth. Yet he spends his life willingly knowing that his blood and sweat will one day result in a better world for his children, but Darrow and his kind have been betrayed. Okay, sounds interesting. Like, I want to go pick this up and read it now. However, when I'm reading it, they're talking about Darrow in a suit that he pees in, and I am not loving that. So I texted the group text with the people that I went to dinner with, and I was like, guys, does it get better than this? Like, it was so hyped up by people I trust. And the first person said, depends on what you mean by better. Not a great sign. My other friend said, yes, wait until the surgery. However, this friend has also given me poor movie recs before that I DNF'd. I DNF'd movies by this person. So we're going to see if that actually lives up to the hype. Red Rising, that's also on my TBR. And see, this is also where I'm getting confused, is because I have Fable and I have Goodreads, and I like made a list on Fable, but it's not on Goodreads. If they just both automatically connected, that was aggressive, but still. ACOTAR, and I'm saying that with hesitancy because I really just don't think that's going to live up to the hype for me, and I'm really not sure how Sarah J Maas can top Throne of Glass. I don't know. I'm sure that's really controversial because that is like a beloved series, but I have my doubts. I have The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson, and this is going to be more in the Christian nonfiction realm, okay? Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. They've loved each other in 1,000 lifetimes. They've killed each other in every one. Evelyn remembers all of her past lives. She also remembers that in every single one, she's been murdered before her 18th birthday by Arden, a supernatural being whose soul and survival is tethered to hers. This is why these book content people have little carts, and then they have the jars, because they can't make decisions, and I'm feeling that right now. We're seeing that my March TBR needs some help. So if you can help me decide what to prioritize on this list, that would be really great, because I'm not the best at making decisions. Here are the potentials. How am I going to read all this? I'm feeling very overwhelmed. We're prioritizing. In March, we're finishing Stone Blind. We're going to read Red Rising, which I'm in chapter 2. I'm going to do Famous Last Words by Jillian McAllister, so I can read one of the February books that I got from Book of the Month. Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen. Gosh, there's so many good books. This is why book content creators, this is their full-time job, because I could. If I didn't have responsibilities and bills to pay, I would be doing that. Okay, so we said Stone Blind, Red Rising, Our Infinite Fates, Famous Last Words, This Is How You Lose the Time War. I want to read that so badly. Adding another one, it would be Artificial Wisdom, just so I can get some good variety. So that's what I have. If you have books that you absolutely love, please put them in the comments, because I'm always adding to my TBR. As you can tell, I need to find one place to put my TBR for sure. So make sure you leave a comment. Also, while you're here, like and subscribe, because that'll help me know if I want to make more of these videos. So that's what I read so far in 2025 as a newbie reader. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.